The economic standoff between Russia and Western powers is intensifying, marking a pivotal chapter in the ongoing battle for global financial supremacy. In a strategic move, Russia has recently frozen the assets of major European Union banks operating within its borders. Simultaneously, the United States is issuing stern warnings to nations attempting to reduce their reliance on the US dollar, hinting at severe consequences for those pursuing de-dollarization strategies. For years, Western financial institutions have continued their operations in Russia, even as geopolitical tensions and conflicts have escalated, generating substantial profits. In 2022 alone, these banks contributed nearly 1 billion euros in taxes to the Russian government, inadvertently bolstering the Russian economy despite the imposition of international sanctions. Among these sanctions, Russia's exclusion from the SWIFT international payment network has significantly restricted Moscow's ability to conduct transactions in dollars and euros. However, EU banks operating in Russia have served as critical financial conduits, enabling transactions in Western currencies and allowing Russia to partially circumvent these restrictions. A prime example of this dynamic is Austria's Raiffeisen Bank International, RBI. In 2021, RBI's earnings in Russia were under 600 million euros. But by the following year, these profits had surged to a remarkable 1.8 billion euros, a threefold increase. This sharp rise also led to a higher tax contribution of 464 million euros to the Russian treasury. While the G7 nations have been urging these banks to withdraw from Russia, Russian President Vladimir Putin has been actively blocking their exit. Russia has frozen the shares of banks like RBI and prohibited the sale of their Russian operations, effectively seizing their assets and profits within the country. This development underscores the worsening relations between the G7 and Russia, marked by reciprocal economic measures that impact all parties involved. While President Putin collaborates with China to build an alternative financial framework, EU banks remain deeply entangled in Russian financial affairs, continuing their operations without interruption. Billions of dollars are currently immobilized within Russia, and crucially, Western financial infrastructures remain accessible to Russian enterprises, exposing a significant weakness in the G7's sanctions regime. Data shows that Raiffeisen Bank International, RBI, serves 2,600 corporate clients and manages accounts for 4 million local individuals in Russia. These businesses and private account holders retain the ability to buy and sell Western currencies and access the SWIFT system, allowing them to receive payments in dollars and euros. This situation undermines the West's goal of fully isolating Russia from the global financial system. In 2022, led by the United States, Western nations imposed stringent sanctions aimed at crippling Russia's banking sector. Despite these efforts, Russia has successfully found alternative pathways for international trade. A significant portion of Russia's trade with China is now conducted using the Chinese renminbi and the Russian ruble, with about 90% of their transactions occurring outside the traditional dollar-dominated system. Given that China is Russia's largest trading partner, the impact of Western sanctions has been significantly reduced. A critical question arises: why hasn't the European Union completely severed Russia from its banking infrastructure? The answer lies in Europe's continued reliance on Russian natural gas. As of May this year, Russia once again surpassed the United States as Europe's primary natural gas supplier. Despite sanctions and political pressures, European industries remain heavily dependent on affordable Russian gas to keep their operations running. Major companies like Volkswagen face the threat of plant closures in Germany due to energy shortages and rising costs, highlighting the severe economic repercussions at play. Europe continues to import significant volumes of Russian gas through three main channels: liquefied natural gas, LNG imports, the Turk Stream pipeline, and the Ukraine transit pipeline. In the second quarter of this year alone, the EU purchased over 12 billion cubic meters of Russian gas via these routes. Facilitating payments for this gas requires the involvement of EU banks operating in Russia, primarily using Western currencies like the euro. Shutting down these banks would create major payment obstacles, potentially forcing Europe to transact in rubles or the Chinese renminbi, unintentionally strengthening Moscow's and Beijing's geopolitical influence. The situation is further complicated by the substantial profits accumulated by Western companies in Russia. Around $8 billion in earnings are at risk of being frozen or becoming inaccessible. With access to its national reserves restricted by Western sanctions, Russia may retaliate by targeting Western businesses still operating within its borders. As of May this year, over 2,000 foreign companies remained active in Russia, while fewer than 400 had withdrawn, often facing significant financial losses due to Russia's burdensome exit taxes. Amid these geopolitical tensions, concerns are growing about the dominance of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Since the 2008 financial crisis, countries have steadily reduced their holdings of US Treasury bonds. The proportion of US debt held by foreign entities has dropped from over 55% to just under 30%. This trend poses a significant threat to the US economy, which depends heavily on borrowing to sustain its fiscal operations. A decrease in demand for US bonds leads to higher yields, raising the cost of servicing the national debt. Alarmingly, US interest payments exceeded $1 trillion in 2023, a figure that has surged dramatically due to the economic measures implemented during the 2020 pandemic lockdowns. This rise is partly driven by extensive stimulus spending and borrowing aimed at supporting the economy. If global movements away from the dollar continue, the U.S. national debt could spiral out of control, with interest payments potentially reaching $2 trillion or even $3 trillion by the end of the decade. This scenario underscores the critical need for the U.S. government to safeguard the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has stressed the importance of maintaining confidence in the U.S. financial system, warning of severe consequences for financial markets and the economy if the nation's ability to meet its debt obligations is questioned. Complicating matters further, former President Donald Trump has proposed a 100% tariff on countries that reduce their reliance on the U.S. dollar should he be reelected. This policy, intended to counter the perceived threat to the dollar's dominance, risks triggering a global trade war and alienating international allies. Such tariffs could provoke retaliatory measures, disrupt global trade, and exacerbate inflation within the United States. The potential fallout is significant. The U.S., which operates a large trade deficit, could face higher costs for imported goods, leading to increased consumer prices and reduced GDP. The Tax Foundation estimates that similar tariff proposals could reduce GDP by nearly 1 percentage point and result in the loss of approximately 700,000 jobs. Additionally, inflation could spike, and other nations might respond by imposing tariffs on U.S. exports, harming American businesses. Efforts to coerce other nations into maintaining the dollar's dominance may backfire, prompting them to strengthen economic ties within blocs like BRICS. These nations experiencing strong economic growth are projected to outpace G7 countries in the coming years and may increasingly prefer trading in their own currencies, further diminishing the dollar's global influence. The shift towards bilateral trade agreements and alternative currencies could reduce the recycling of dollars into U.S. Treasury bonds, intensifying the challenges facing the U.S. economy. In summary, the escalating economic conflict between Russia and the West, along with the growing challenges to the U.S. dollar's dominance, signals a period of profound uncertainty in global financial markets. Russia's freezing of EU bank assets and U.S. threats against nations pursuing de-dollarization highlight the complex interplay of geopolitical strategies affecting international trade and economic stability. As nations navigate these turbulent dynamics, the potential for significant shifts in the global economic order becomes increasingly apparent. The decisions made by governments and financial institutions in the coming months and years will likely shape the future landscape of international finance and the global balance of economic power. Thank you for watching.